All right, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 1, Lesson 10. This is all about comparing real numbers. So the real number system, we've seen this before. This was in our 7th grade book, dealing with rational numbers, talking about different examples of each kind. Now we're going to be adding in something called irrational numbers. So, for example, natural numbers, in fact, all natural numbers are inside of this whole numbers section. So if a number is a natural number, it's automatically a whole number. Same thing, all of the whole numbers are inside of the integers section, and all of those are inside the rational numbers section. So a natural number is also a whole number, and an integer, and a rational number. So natural numbers, these are numbers here that are positive numbers without any fractions or decimals. So that'd be like some examples: 1, 2, 7, 8, 96. Those are some examples of natural numbers. There aren't any decimals. There's no negative numbers. Big thing here, though, is it does not include 0. 0 is not a natural number. In fact, the only whole number that isn't a natural number is 0. So whole numbers are 0 and then all the natural numbers. Now, integers, these are positive and negative whole numbers. So, all of the whole numbers and then all of their opposites. So, 3 is a whole number and a natural number and an integer. But negative 3 is just an integer, because natural numbers and whole numbers are always going to be positive. Now, the new parts here, looking at rational and irrational. Rational numbers are numbers that can be written as a fraction, because the word ratio is in the word rational. So a fraction is a ratio. So in this case, it would be like 3/11, 2/7, -4 1/8. Those were examples. All integers can be written as a fraction. All whole numbers can be written as a fraction. And all natural numbers can also be written as a fraction. And then irrational numbers, this right here means not rational. So these are numbers that can't be written as a fraction. Some examples of these would be pi. Pi cannot be written as a fraction. Pi can be approximated, but pi cannot be written as a fraction. Any square root, or any root, I guess, any root of a non-perfect square or cube. So like square root of 2. 2 is not a perfect square. It's also not a perfect cube. The square root of 2 is an irrational number then. Square root of 7, that's not a perfect square or a perfect cube. Cube root of 9, that's not a perfect cube. So a cube root of a non-perfect cube, that's irrational. Even though 9 is a perfect square, we're taking the cube root of it, and 9 is not a perfect cube. So we're going to go through some examples, identifying the set of numbers that a number is written or is in. We'll then talk about how to compare those and then order them. So example 1, 0.246 repeating. This right here, the repeating sign, means that this is rational, because any repeating number can be written as a fraction. So this is a rational number. And that's it. It's not a natural number, integer, or whole number because it's a decimal. But it is a rational number. Letter B, square root of 17. This is irrational because 17 is not a perfect square. Letter C, negative 7.25. This is a rational number because it's a negative number that has a decimal. The decimal tells us that it's a rational number. And then letter D, square root of 225. 225 is a perfect square. So the square root of 225 is 15. 15 fits into the natural numbers because it's positive without decimals. If it's a natural number, then that means it's also a whole number, integer, and rational. Because if we look back on this side, natural numbers are inside of those other three areas. Next set of examples then, comparing them. So when we compare numbers, we really like them to be in the same kind of format, either fractions or decimals, something along those lines. So in this case, the square root of 125, that's not a perfect square, which means this is going to be an irrational number, but that also means that we can find it as a decimal. So if I go ahead, excuse me, and use my calculator to find what the square root of 125 is. So I'm using my calculator here. Square root of 125. That would be 11.18 plus some stuff. So I'm going to write this down as 11.18. With 11 and 7/8 now, I can write it into my calculator like that, 11 and 7/8. Now if I hit equals and change that to a decimal, I get 11.875. So this is 11.875. So we would write it down as this. We always want these numbers back in their original format. And we always talk about how the left side compares to the right side. So the way that this would be said is the square root of 125 is less than 11 and 7/8. That's how this would be said. Example 3. Now we're going to be ordering from least to greatest. So we're going to use the calculator again to come up with decimal values of each one of these. So 6 1/4 is 6.25. So what we're going to do is just above the 6 1/4, I'm going to write 6.25. Next one, we're going to be looking at the square root of 38, and that is 6.16. So I'm going to write down 6.16. 6.5 is already written as a decimal. And then the square root of 36, that's 6. So now we have our 4 decimal values. We want to order them from least to greatest. And again, just like in example 2, we want these numbers to be in the original format that they were given. So the first number we would write down is this value here, because 6 is the least of these 4 values. The original format of that number was the square root of 36, so we're going to write down the square root of 36. And then I'm going to cross that number out so I'm not using it again. Of the next 3, 6.16 is the least. So I'm going to write down the square root of 38 because that was the original format. Next then would be 6.25. The original format of that number was 6 1/4. And then finally, 6.5. All right, that is the end of Lesson 10. If you have any questions, please let me know.